I think that the market's moving now, and I do believe that there's a transition. We're seeing a big demand for managed services, and I think Synamedia is one of the only companies in the world that can deliver a complete end-to-end proposition. Really, if you look at things like live events and you look at the TV landscape today, there's more and more consolidation happening. The TV business needs to be run more efficiently, and that's because we have all of these big streaming tech giants that have come in. What we've seen with Sky over the last 2 years is phenomenal.
Whenever I film podcasts, I always do my preparation. I usually have an awareness of the person, and I look at the market and sense what we might talk about in that podcast. Well, today I'm in the studio with Sam Sweet. And Sam is somebody that I've known for a relatively long period of time, but he is at a fascinating juncture, not only in his career, but for the brand that he is now working as head of strategic pursuits for. So I'm looking forward to exploring that with Sam and also hearing your observations, Sam, on what's happening in the market, how it's different to last year, what we might be able to expect. But first of all, welcome to the studio.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, it's been a while, and it's great to be here and speaking with you. We do have a lot in common, and thank you again for your LinkedIn post you did recently. It was very complimentary. Thank you.
It was a pleasure, Sam. It was indicative of a genuine feeling that I had when I saw you take the role with Synamedia, where, you know, as someone that's worked as a headhunter in the OTT and streaming space for a few years now, and knowing you, being a friend, it revealed a lot of things that a lot of people will never realize or have the opportunity to realize in their career. You know, you've had a huge career globally. You've been the CEO of one of the most well-known brands. You've got a wealth of experience. I've been in meetings with you and heard you speak about things where you've got experience in the bag that just brings so much equity to your presence, impact. And when I saw you take the role with Synamedia, I thought, that's super interesting, because a lot of CEOs only ever want to be a CEO again. Or a board member. But you're not now. You're head of strategic pursuits, which still sounds super exciting. I've never even seen that job title. I want to understand more of what it's about. But set the stage, bring people up to speed with what they might not know in terms of why we're sat here having this conversation and what you're doing now.
Yeah. It is a fascinating role, and I think Svi and Steve had the foresight to really look at what they really needed to drive the market in what they're trying to do at the moment. And I think bringing in experienced sort of C-level executives who've been in the industry for a long time and have built a strong reputation really helps drive that credibility. And I think that's been one of the great kind of insights from Steve and Svi.
Yeah, hugely.
And I think there's a fantastic opportunity. And that's why I'm really excited to be here with Synamedia, is because I think that the market's moving now. And I do believe that there's a transition happening in the TV market. We're seeing a big demand for managed services. And I think Synamedia is one of the only companies in the world that can deliver a complete end-to-end proposition.
How would you summarize that shift that you've just spoken about?
Look, I mean, you look at what's happened with Liberty Global over the last sort of couple of years. They've outsourced their whole TV platform to a third-party provider. You look at what Sky's gone through, and this is a fantastic sort of case study in TV operational efficiency. I mean, the TV business needs to be run more efficiently, and that's because we have all of these big streaming tech giants that have come in.
So going back to your role and the shifting tectonic plates of agendas of the consumer-facing organizations as well as the competitive horizon, how would you summarize your role now? What's your purpose as head of strategic pursuits?
Yeah, really looking at those big, large opportunities within the EMEA context and seeing where Synamedia can operate in terms of looking at, you know, taking over those TV services in some cases, but also Synamedia have kind of best-in-class technology in various different domains. But when you start to bring it all together and you start to have that complete end-to-end platform offering, it becomes extremely powerful. And I think that's what I'm really excited about. If you look at what Synamedia has done recently with winning MTN, you're talking about a major, you know, African operator, very price conscious, and you can see that this is the signal of intent that Synamedia is really now able to offer high quality, low latency streaming platform at an affordable, you know, price point as we move into this wave of next gen TV, where, you know, we have to run TV more efficiently than we've done.
You've mentioned price there. Obviously, I don't know if you'd agree, Sam, but it's at least, being diplomatic, a busy competitive horizon. You know, some would say packed when it comes to OTT platform providers. It feels like what you're saying is that it's not about competing on price. It's about being able to talk at a value level to the people that need the functionality that Go provides.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were just talking before starting this podcast, how many podcast interviews you've done. So you've got a fantastic view of the market. I think you're absolutely right. It's about delivering that value. It's about having that trust and credibility to be able to deliver high quality, low latency. And because I think really, if you look at things like live events and you look at the TV landscape today, there's more and more consolidation happening, and more of the vendors are consolidating as well, not just on the customer front. You're seeing vendor consolidation. And therefore, I think this is a great opportunity for TV service providers to turn to Synamedia to run their TV service.
Live, sports, that genre of media and content. You've mentioned it a couple of times now. What is it about Go that lends itself in particularly favorable ways to those formats? And then also, let's talk a little bit about shorts and reels, because I am aware of the fact that there's some super exciting stuff coming down the line when it comes to your ambitions around the vertical formats as well.
I mean, there's some fantastic announcements coming, and we're very excited about what we'll be announcing at NAB, for example. So certainly, when you look at the opportunity that we need to capture with Gen Z, Gen Alpha, it becomes very important to make sure that audience is part of the TV, of next gen TV. And I think we've got some very interesting, exciting technology that we'll be announcing to really look at how we bring that audience into the fold of TV and have this multi-screen experience which we see today.
The other side of the coin to the functionality that I see with what you represent and what Synamedia are doing at the moment is recognizing the value that decision makers want to extract when they're speaking to providers. How does that conversation put them ahead of the curve with the challenges that they faced historically and keep them away from challenges moving forward? When you think about those kind of meetings, which I know you're a seasoned veteran at, Sam, how do you prepare yourself for the things that CEOs, CTOs, chief commercial officers in really large broadcasting organizations want to have? I mean, it's not a PowerPoint presentation, is it?
No, absolutely. And I think you raise a good point, is that, we sometimes in our industry get too stuck on the technology when it's about the KPIs. It's about measuring engagement KPIs. It's about understanding how personalization can drive more, stickiness in the service. So the type of conversations at C-suite, and this is why this is why I'm doing strategic pursuits. This is why you see others being, brought into Synamedia like Nick Forward and Ricardo Minari. We're all here as seasoned C-suite execs, understanding that it's the KPIs that are important. It's about measuring those engagement KPIs. It's about measuring subscriber growth. It's about understanding how to create more revenue from advertising. And drawing it back to, for example, something that Synamedia is very proud of. We developed AdSmart in the UK with Sky, and AdSmart is still a revolutionary way of looking at advertising, and that's now contributing a significant portion of Sky's advertising revenue in the UK. So being able to talk about KPIs, about particularly now operational efficiency, is certainly something that's top of mind for CEOs.
What about interactivity as a topic? Because you've mentioned a few times the kind of demographics and, the Gen Z type thing. If I look at my family, what happens under my roof, 15-year-old, 6-year-old, even a 4-year-old is fluent when it comes to picking up the device and using the UI. It's amazing. What kind of conversations have you had or do you anticipate having about Go as a product, how it's positioned well when it comes to, generational preferences?
Yeah, I mean, you've talked a lot. I think I've been following some of your podcasts talking about the attention economy and how to really understand how to get that sense of inclusion from that younger audience. I think it's key that we understand how the change in behavior affects the way we look at and how we interact with the main screen. And as you said, I've also have two sons. I've got a 19-year-old now that's got just actually got his job for an internship and going to be starting his internship.
Congratulations!
Thank you very much. And a 10-year-old, and you see the way they they experience how, when you're in the living room, what they do. And my son's, like probably every teenager, big on Snapchat, and he's using Snapchat whilst we're watching a Man City game. So it's how to bring that experience together. And I think Synamedia have something really compelling that we'll be announcing.
Vertical is normal to them, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I was thinking, I was chatting to someone the other day about, we were brought up with the lean back experience, as it's called now. You watch the TV and you're just consuming. It's a one-way transmission. There's no way to interact. That's just not the case anymore. And if you take that forward, if I think of a lot of the organizations that have tried to pioneer or who occupy the vendor space when it comes to what historically we've called second screen, I wonder whether or not there is a second screen anymore, or if both of the screens are a primary screen to different generations. It's kind of convoluted.
Yeah, and look, I'm fortunate enough in my career to be obviously I'm absolutely excited about my Synamedia role as head of strategic pursuits, but I also still work with other companies in the space, and through that experience of working with other vendors, I'm able to understand a bit more about what's happening in interactivity, for example, and what you can do with content synchronization between, second screen and main screen. Some really exciting technology coming out around that, or interactive displays around how you can bring interactivity within a connected TV environment.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to dive a little bit into that experience that you've got, Sam, when it comes to the other things that you've done around sales coaching and all of those sort of things. What do you think the mood music is within the market at the moment when it comes to big providers like Synamedia and others, and being long sales life cycles with broadcasters, and also the perception, if not the reality sometimes, that a migration to a new platform is going to be a huge undertaking. If you personify this rejuvenation of Go and approach to market with strategic pursuits, how do you approach those conversations with the broadcast? What do they want to hear about?
You're right. One of the big challenges for any type of migration is the migration itself, right? You've got a lot of TV service providers that have quite complicated end-to-end architectures. Probably a lot of vendors doing content security. They probably have another vendor doing content management. They have another vendor doing front-end application. In fact, they'll probably have several vendors doing front-end applications and doing device management. So yeah, I think simplifying that is a big opportunity for Synamedia. But I think the most important part of Synamedia's offerings is this reliability and reputation of being able to do major migrations for some of the largest TV service providers in the world. Sky's trusting Synamedia to be able to, help deliver their, direct-to-consumer business is huge. And I think it's that trust and that reliability and that ability to execute and deliver and the talent that's remained within Synamedia that puts us in a very strong position to be able to convince at C-suite that this is going to be a walk in the park. There's obviously going to be ups and downs with a big migration project, but trust us and we'll deliver.
You just mentioned retaining talent in the business. There's obviously, I was going to say decades, but it's hundreds of years of experience within Synamedia. And the ambition to bring people, you mentioned Nick Forward, Ricardo Minari, Ricardo in Latin America, I think is on the leadership team of Abbott's, their kind of industry body for Latin America for OTT as well, extremely active in that market. There's Nick in Australia. Nick has obviously worked at C-level in consumer-facing broadcasters. It's a pretty powerful constellation of people that can foster the kind of conversations that you've just mentioned. Is there, yourself in Europe, Nick in Australia, Ricardo in São Paulo, is there a regional accent, a regional take on what you've just said?
Yes.
Differences?
Yeah, I think there is. You look at the North American market and you look at the APAC market. These are very different markets for TV. And having been in this industry for some while, I can really tell you that there's a real difference in terms of behavior and experience and expectation levels. And I think that what Synamedia have done really well is to bring in people that are specialists in those regions. And I think you'll see more of that in the short term as well, in terms of expanding this network of C-suite professionals. I mean, you look at someone like Nick Ford. He's been at Stern. He's been on the customer side, and that's always fantastic to have that level of experience and breadth of knowledge.
I actually love that when you see people that can straddle both sides, provider and customer side. I think it brings such a depth of understanding and a genuine empathy towards what the product represents and what's required. Because that person, I'm an example of that. For many years, I sat being the hiring manager or the executive facing agencies that were hiring for me. Now I'm on the provider side. It gives me a feeling for what the genuine requirement is. I can only imagine what kind of conversations you guys have within that. Is it called the Strategic Pursuits team? Is that the kind of brand?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And it is, and we meet regularly, and we're sharing notes as to what we see in terms of the trends and the discussions that we're having to really make sure that we sharpen our approach as Synamedia into the market. And I think also I also have a experience working with other companies that really help me understand what it takes to deliver personalization, for example, to deliver interactivity. And I think that really does help in terms of having a broad view of really what's important.
Let's just touch on personalization for a second,
Sure.
because a lot of the mood music that I've read about over the last 18 months or 24 months has been around AI-enabled personalization. And I've also heard some quite stark contrasting views around whether or not AI is good for personalization or whether or not it actually takes the consumer down a rabbit hole of just focusing them on the same kind of content. With what you know, Sam, what's your perspective and posture on personalization, where it is, how good it is?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think there's a lot of misconception about AI. And even now you see in the market a lot of companies being repriced downwards because there's this view that AI is going to take over every workflow and every process, and everyone's going to be able to build a new company from scratch using AI tools. That's in some respects, that's part of the truth. But at the end of the day, even though you have AI, there's still a need to be able to interact with that service provider's environment. There's still a need for sort of personalization engine. There's still a need for that level of control. You've got a lot of things that happen where there's a lot of talk about trust and security at the moment in AI because there's these hallucinations. So of course you have to be quite careful as to what you put in front of consumers when you have a responsibility to give them a service. And so I think there's AI doesn't replace what needs to be done from a personalization standpoint. And I think what Synamedia are doing to bring AI is pretty much from the bottom up in terms of how they look at developing and their roadmap around products is obviously a key differentiator.
Yeah. If there's one market, Sam, that ignites you personally around the world? You've spoken about Latin America, you mentioned North America, you obviously live in Europe, and I think Africa, sub-Saharan Africa is a super exciting market. But we're here in the Middle East as well, and quite often it's true, but the interpretation from the rest of the world about what's happening in the Middle East, largely because of the availability of capital and the appetite for technology and demographic in places like Saudi Arabia as well, with 70% of the population being under the age of 30. What market ignites you, Sam?
Oh, look, I mean, you know how I'd answer that. I'm excited by what's happening in MENA. There's no doubt about it. I enjoy coming here. I've had a lot of success with working with some of the major companies out here, whether it's NBC Shahid, whether that's OSN, or whether that's effectively STC. And I think there's tremendous potential. And there's tremendous potential and opportunity here with what's happening. What's happening with live sports is incredible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everything seems to be happening in Riyadh. You look at it, whether it's UFC, whether it's boxing, whether it's football. There's great opportunity there. And where there's that connection of live sports and those premium rights is an opportunity for growth. And that's why we're very focused on this MENA market.
Yeah, absolutely. Sam, I wish you the best of luck in your new role. It's
Thank you,
super
Chris.
exciting to watch. It's great to watch in the public domain, but I love what we have as connections and friends kind of offline as well. And I hope to be able to check in with you regularly throughout the course of the year and maybe get more content like this so that we can share with the market the Sam Sweet perspective of what's happening in the industry.
Absolutely delighted. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks.